you glasses wearers out there, do you ever have a point where like you take your glasses off and you clean your glasses and then you put them back on and suddenly you just want to start singing, I can see clearly now the rain has gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. 'Cause I know I certainly feel that way almost every single time I clean my glasses. I don't usually sing it out loud, though I have occasionally done that, but I always think it every single time, and it's just like a magical experience. You just realize how dirty your glasses were, and you don't understand how you didn't think that they were that dirty until you cleaned them. Maybe that's just me. Yes, no. All right, well, let's just get right into class today, since apparently I need some mental help. Hi, welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today we are finally getting to part 2 of our world analysis on the continent of Ansalon from the world of Kryn. Sorry it's taken me quite so long to get to it. I realized there's actually a lot to talk about, and I know I had mentioned I wanted to split it into 2 parts, but I might need to split it into 3 parts. We're going to see how today goes, because obviously we don't want it to be too long of a class. I know my class is already long enough, and you're like, we needed to shorten them down anyway. We don't need them to go longer. I get it. But as I was creating the second portion that I wanted, which had to do with the actual beings and creatures and histories and societies that go along in our world here, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of different things to break down. If I want to spend any time discussing the beings themselves, if I want to talk about societies themselves, if I want to talk about the histories, things like that. So it's gonna be quite a lot, and I realize that. So I made up all of it, a outline for all of it, but I think we might have to split it up into a 3rd part, because I think this is gonna be quite a long class otherwise. We're gonna see how it goes, but I just know myself, and I know I like to talk. Maybe some people think I ramble, but I do like to go deep in, and that's the whole point of our classes, is to really delve in deep. So I don't want to skip over things that I think should be talked about more, and give us a better analysis by trying to make it all into one part. So we'll just see how it goes, and hopefully you enjoy it either way, and hopefully if we need a part 3, that will just make that part 3 and won't have to stress about it. We're just going to be going with the flow, easy come, easy go, and just see where we get to today. Alright, so hopefully you've watched part 1 of our world analysis at this point. If not, go ahead and watch that one if you want to know more about the magic and gods, mythology, more of those portions of the world. This is going to be more focusing on the actual societies, beings, creatures, like I mentioned earlier. All right, let's go ahead and just dive right in, since we already have so much to talk about. And I'm going to start our world analysis for this section on beings. Now, it's kind of a gray area with how you classify things, I feel like, especially in fantasy, because in fantasy, both urban and high fantasy, you have humans and you have other classes of beings that are kind of creature-like, but they're humanoid. And so I consider beings to be like humans, or to be humanoid races with humanoid characteristics and societies and cultures. So that's what I would classify a being as versus a creature. And when we get to creatures, I will go ahead and talk more about my classification on what I think a creature is versus a being. But that's my definition, at least that's the definition I'm going to be using for our class today. You can let me know if you think that's still kind of confusing, or if you agree, disagree, whatever else, for possibly for the future, if it's kind of a hard classification for you. But I would consider a being to be humanoid, and to have a humanoid thoughts, humanoid cultures, humanoid societies, humanoid type beings, so humans and humanoid beings. So we can't just classify everything as being human, since there are lots of non-human characters and societies in fantasy. So that's what I deem them as beings. And so that's the class that we're going to start with right now, is the different kind of beings that we have in our world of Krynn, at least as we've seen in our trilogy that we have read, the Dragonlance Chronicles, and a little bit delving into each being's kind of characteristics and what we kind of see them as. As always, if there's anything that I miss or anything that you want to dispute on or anything you want to comment on at all, whatever it may be, you are more than welcome to let me know down in the comments below and on Twitter, everything that's like that. So if I miss anything or you think I should have added anything, don't panic. You're welcome to tell me, and we are welcome to have a whole discussion about it. I would love to hear your feedback as always. Okay, enough rambling. Let's jump in. So obviously the first type of beings that we have are humans. That's the most around across the board one that most fantasies have, because we relate to humans in the fact that we are human in our own world. So usually humans do play a pretty good, if not significant, part of most fantasy novels, despite all the magic and all the different kinds of beings that are involved. Humans are pretty much always, I don't think I've read any fantasy where humans are not included at all. Even if they do have a lesser part, they're at least included in some form or another. And the humans in our world of Krynn here, our Continent of Ansalon, is depicted very similar to humans in our society. Not meaning, the technology or anything like that. That's a completely different type of thing. But I just mean that they have very similar lifespans. They're a very similar look. We have very similar types of I guess you could say, what is the word I'm looking for? Habits, I think is what I'm trying to say, is very similar habits, very similar styles of living, very similar thought processes, that kind of stuff. So they're very similar to humans in our own society. They are very diverse type of culture. We've got different societies with different views, different cultures. And then we've got someplace like Solus, where it seems like a lot of different types of beings live together, not just humans. And so the humans there have more of a diverse and open-minded culture there. We'll get more to that as we talk later on with societies, but just in general, there's very diverse amounts. We've got different cities, and with different cities, there's different types of human cultures, just like we have in our own society, where depending on where you live, those humans have their own types of culture and their own beliefs and stuff. We also have humans that we see that are very prejudiced, just like in our own society. We have prejudice in our own societies against, other races, other people, other ideas, prejudice about a lot of things. And we see that in several other humans in our story here. Just for example, Goldmoon and Riverwind, when they first meet Tannis and the gang, they are very prejudiced against non-humans, and of course they evolve as characters do, learn that their prejudices were not what they are, how actually those kinds of beings are, and they change their views. But there are several different humans that we meet that do have the prejudices and show that the human race does have prejudice in its society. Again, we have kind of pretty much an average lifespan for humans in our world. They seem to be living, they're not like elves that can live hundreds and hundreds of years. They have a normal lifespan for humans, at least in our society. They have a very similar lifespan. And that we do see that they are also able to be magic users. For Raslin, our main magic user that we see in this trilogy, is a human, and he does have the ability to do magic. So these are the kind of the main things when it comes to humans that we see in this trilogy. They're very relatable, the fact that we know humans in our own society, and so we can relate to them since they are very similar to the humans of our own society. And I wouldn't say it makes a camaraderie in the fact that we don't, at least I don't personally really connect overly with humans more than other beings. In the story, we have a very dynamic group, diverse group of heroes that makes it kind of where you don't really have humans be more prominent than not. But I do feel like it makes it really easy to understand where the human portions are coming from. You're like, oh yeah, I get that. Oh yeah, it makes relation to the society that we have for ourselves. So you kind of connect based on where the human race and their thought processes are coming from. You can be like, oh, I can see how that would be realistic, or that's how they're coming up with this logic, because you see these kinds of situations in our own world compared to the human race. I hope that made sense. I hope that you get what I was trying to say there. Sometimes I wonder. You guys know this. I've mentioned it before. All right. So that's humans, at least the main overview of humans that I think are really important. Again, because humans are not overly important versus other beings, I don't feel like there's anything overly crazy special that I need to mention for their list of their general attributes and how humans generally are in this book and in this world and in this society. So let's go ahead and jump into elves, which, if you're a fan of fantasy, elves can be very different depending on what story you read. They have a lot of similar qualities, but a lot of times they can be very different. And sometimes we can take elves in two different senses, in the fact that there can be elves like little pixies, or fairy type beings, which can be called elves. And then we have our Lord of the Rings, or at least I usually use Lord of the Rings since that's the most famous and one of the most early on books that developed elves to be more humanoid, to be more of a humanoid culture. So I don't want to say this for certain because I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like I heard from somewhere that Tolkien is actually the one that created elves, the concept of elves to be like this, versus the little pixie fairies. But I'm not 100% sure on that, so I'm not going to say that with 100% certainty, but I do believe that Lord of the Rings, if not the first one, it's one of the very first ones, and one of the ones that at least changed popular culture into thinking elves were more of a humanoid type creature or being. Now, in our world of Kryn here, I have a list of how elves are depicted. So, the first thing, which is a very stereotypical thing for elves, is they have a very long lifespan. That's something that most elves, and most high fantasies especially, are depicted with a very long lifespan. They have a much longer life than humans, which means that they view time and view change very differently than humans do, because humans go by lifetimes go by so fast compared to elves. It seems like a much quicker society, and elves are a much slower paced society, a lot more calm, a lot more I guess you could say wisdom based, in the fact that they can live so long that they're supposed to have gained more wisdom, much slower culture, much feeling like they have lot more time, so they can take their time in their lives because they got a lot more life to live. They're also known to be very pretty looking. They're most usually have much better looks in general as a society than, say, humans do. They're supposed to be very doll-like, very attractive type creatures. I feel like we do see that a little bit in this world. Not quite so much that it's like really focused on, but they talk a lot about Laranna's beauty. They talk about how Gilthanas is a very handsome guy. They talk about how, the elves kind of seem timeless, especially with Ras, with him his eyes, that where everybody seems like they're dying. And they talk about how Lorana, because she's such in the prime of her life, all he sees is her magnificent beauty and doesn't see her affected by time and affected by, looking at her like she's dying all the time through his hourglass eyes. So even though we don't see it in this story as projected as the whole society, we do see the elves that we are close to, that is certainly the case with them. They kind of touch on how young and handsome and pretty the elves are that we know of in a more close proximity. So we see that the elves as a culture are also very, very prejudiced. Almost, I'm not going to say they are, because it's kind of hard to judge how prejudiced a culture is versus another culture. But it seems like they are at least as prejudiced, if not more prejudiced, than humans. I know it's a very bold statement, especially since the elves pride themselves on thinking that they are so much better than humans are, that you see that a lot in these books. We've talked about it before in our analysis of the books themselves. We see that they are misguided in their own thinking and the fact that they think that they are better than the humans, and then they seem to act even worse than many of the humans in the story have, especially with their prejudice. And we'll talk a lot about it with their societies a little bit later, but they are even prejudiced of themselves. Just, like humans can be prejudiced of other humans for whatever reason, elves are very prejudiced against other elves that are not part of their own society and their own culture, but the different elves. So we see them very prejudiced against themselves and very prejudiced against other races, and they believe that they are higher and better than any of the other races or beings in this world. They're very egotistical. This comes along kind of in the same vein. They're very full of themselves. They're very egotistical, narcissistic kind of people as a society. I'm not saying necessarily that the specific people are necessarily narcissistic of themselves, but as a society, they view themselves better. They think that they are the king of the crop. They think that they are what's going on, and they are definitely project that onto other elves, like we mentioned, and to the other races. They very cocky, very much think they are the blessed people by the gods, and I don't know how. Well, I mean, in a way that they're very human like that, I would say. I was almost going to say, I don't know how you can think that so highly of yourself and then also do these kinds of things and still think that you're beloved of the gods, but humans are very much like that too. So, I mean, I guess in this case, that just is what comes with being egotistical, and so they're very humanoid, very human-like in that way. They are very much have very similar characteristics to the humans that they look down upon. They do have a closer relationship to nature, though, than the humans do. They like to live in forests. Both Qualinisti and Sylvanisti did make their home in woods and forests. They are very much closer to nature and to life, and being thinking that life is very sacred, not just human or elf or any other kind of life like that, but also nature itself. And they try to work with nature when they live in the woods. They try to not, they're not cutting down all the trees. They're trying to work within the construct of nature because they believe that the nature is sacred itself. So they are very, very close to nature and its gifts. We have a little less of a diversity. I'm not going to say that elves are all the same, but I do feel like when we look at the different types of societies that we have, we'll see this a little bit more. But I feel like compared to the humans, the elves are less diverse. A lot of the societies, even though they are different, I feel like they are very similar to each other, and they have very similar thoughts and feelings and ways of going about things. So even though they have different societies, I feel like those societies have very similar cultures, very similar ideas, very similar prejudices. So I feel like there's a little bit less of a diversity between the elves societies as like the humans cultures and societies. And again, we will come into that when we talk to you about societies a little bit more in a little bit more detail. And then we see that the elves are much more secluded than the humans. The humans are kind of spread out all over the place, and the elves are in very restricted areas in their forests. The Kaganisti, I believe, live by a river, and the sea elves obviously live in the sea. So they're very much their own little groups, their own little clumps. You don't see a lot of elves other than, like Tanis obviously is a half elf, and he is living out with humans and things like that. But we don't really see full true-blooded elves living outside of the elven society either. They're very much to themselves, excluded. They've excluded themselves. And even the elves have mentioned that they want to try and get away from the world because they believe that the other races will pollute them a little bit. They do mention that, though we don't get it too much in this set of books. I do feel like we do have a touch on it, and it does get it mentioned since they want to be away from everybody else. And when they come out of hiding, they don't run to any human places, any dwarven places, anything else like that. They all run to the same area. So elves are stuck with elves. Even in times of crisis, they just kind of all clump together because they don't want to be surrounded by any of the other races or beings. And we also see that they are able to be magic users as well. Gilthanas is a magic user. So we see that just like humans, elves also have the ability to use magic. We don't know exactly how much they use magic, how practiced they are, if they do the test in the High Tower of Sorcery. We don't know too in depth on the scale that they use magic on, but we do know that they are capable of using magic, and they have magic users among them who know what they're doing. They're not just they're not like forbidden to practice or anything else. They, like Gilthanas, they do cultivate their magic and do cultivate their powers. We just don't know to what extent they do that for or what they focus their magic building on. Okay, next we've got the dwarves. And I feel like the dwarves, we actually don't have tons of time with them. Like we have Flint, and we do have at the beginning of book 2, we have that time where they're in the mountain, but we don't really have tons of interaction with the dwarves in this set of books, which I find is interesting. And I feel like we know the least amount about the dwarves. Is that just me, or do you agree? I'd love to know down below how you feel about the dwarves and how much time we have interacting with them in this series. But I do have some things for us to talk about for them. We do know that they have longer lives than humans. They're not as long as elves. They're not like, hundreds and hundreds of years, but we do know that Flint is 100 and something. I don't remember his exact age, but I do know that him and Tanis have been running around for like 80 years, and Flint was already a grown man by the time him and Tanis were together. So he's definitely over 100. I thought it was around 150, but I'm not 100% sure. But I do know they've been running around for like a long time together, and that's how they became so close. So they have longer lives, but Flint at his 100 and something years is considered getting older, and that's why he was having the physical health problems, and that led to ultimately, unfortunately, to him dying on his journey. He pushed himself a bit too hard. So they do have a longer lifespan, even if it's not as long as elves. They do have a longer lifespan than humans do. Generally, they are pretty short in stature. They're not as tall as humans. I wouldn't say they're as short as kids, like Kinder would be, but they are definitely a shorter race of beings, and a little bit stouter, a little bit more of a thicker body type, more of a, stockier build. There we go. So I'm trying to think. A stockier built race of beings. They're shorter, a little bit stockier, a little bit more tough type. Sorry for saying so much. I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. They're more made for like hard labor, digging, mining, those kinds of stuff that they usually do in the mountains. So that's their race of being is a lot more stockier and more built for manual labor. That makes any sense whatsoever. Sometimes I feel like words don't communicate well with me. All right. Generally, I feel like they are a gruffer race of beings. Again, this kind of goes with them being the mountain mining people. They just happen to be more gruffer people. Not necessarily that they're mean or that they're bad in any way, shape, or form. They're just more of a gruffer people. They don't want to show weakness. I feel like they have to be tough, strong at all times. And that is definitely shown in Flint. Flint never wants to admit when he has a weakness, especially when it comes to things that doesn't go well for him. For example, he doesn't want to admit that he is allergic to horsehair and that he's wrong about that mane on that helmet that he's allergic to. So he always calls it a griffin's mane because he doesn't want to admit that he might be wrong. He doesn't want to admit that he gets seasick on boats, and so instead he says he's dying, and that he's just dying, and that's why he has all these health problems, because he doesn't want to admit that he has a weakness of being seasick on a boat. He also doesn't want to admit that he's scared of boats, so he just X-nays boats as an option at all times. He's just like, nope, never riding on a boat. And he doesn't want to admit that it's just because he's afraid of being on a boat. He will never say he's afraid of being on a boat. He'll just be like, nope, because somebody else might try and drown me. So it's somebody else's fault that I don't want to get on that boat. So in general, they're gruffer, try to be tough type of culture. Don't want to admit their weaknesses, or to even, I think, to themselves want to know that they have weaknesses. They just want to believe that they are able to go and do whatever. All right. I do think, even though we don't see it quite as much, they do have a little bit of prejudice. I feel like that's a lot of times with many beings and races of beings. Prejudice kind of comes with the territory and the fact that people, meaning all the races in general, can be judgmental. That's just, I don't want to say human nature because not all of them are human, but that's just the nature of being on a higher level of thinking, I think. For people to make assumptions, for people to want to make themselves feel good, and so they look down on others. So I feel like that's just a common territory for all races of beings, kind of having some level of prejudice. We don't see it super hardcore in this story, especially because Flint is a very, very open person. But we do get a little bit of him being against, gully dwarves, having the less than pleasant view of gully dwarves, or the fact that he's a hill dwarf and he's angry about the mountain dwarves, and how the mountain dwarves, even though they let them into their mountain, they don't want anything to do with any other race of being. Pretty much they want to just keep to themselves and not have to deal with the other races in their mountain. So they are nice enough, yes, to open up the mountain, but part of that was also because they had the hammer that could forge the lances and was given back to them. So it was kind of like a trading situation, not necessarily because out of the goodness of their heart, they wanted the humans to be in their mountain. They were more than happy to have them leave. We're not really seeing too much magic for dwarves. Don't see them as being heavily magic users. So doesn't mean that that's not possible, but at least at this point, we don't really see dwarves as a race of beings that really does anything with magic. They're more of the hard labor, do-it-themselves kind of beings. It makes me wonder if dwarves are even capable of doing magic or not. That's not clear. We just don't see it. But with Flint's kind of mistrust of Raslin and all his magic, it seems like they're people that do not really touch magic at all. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the Kinder. I know a lot of people are very annoyed by TAS and Kinders in general, their natural tendencies, but I really love TAS. As I've mentioned before, he's one of my very favorite characters in the whole Dragonlance series. But he can also be annoying, I get it. But let's go ahead and talk about what he and other Kinders say about their own race of being. They're very childlike. And maybe that's what makes it annoying, is that they're just a grown child that will never grow up mentally. But I actually find that that's one of the more endearing qualities of TAS, is that he's just such a happy, free person, because he does have this kind of childlike innocence, this childlike way about life, not worrying about things, just being happy. And to be honest, I think we can all learn something from the Kinder, because they don't let the world get them down. Again, it might be just, the innocence of never growing up, but that doesn't make them stupid, because TAS is definitely not stupid. But they're very childlike in their view of the world. They try not to make a big deal out of things. They just go with the flow, roll with the punches. And I think that actually, as a society, at least in our society, that sometimes we need to do that more. That it actually would make us live happier, better lives if we weren't so caught up in worrying about things, and that we could have a happier existence if we were a little bit more like the Kinder, a little bit more back to our roots of childhood, where we didn't worry about so much. And it's actually what helps TAS be get to the places where, with the Dragon Orb, he finds the Dragon Orb because he doesn't really care about wandering around in a place he shouldn't be. And that ends up helping the characters. So I feel like it can be a very good trait, even in the fact of him not caring so much about things gives him access to more than the other characters wouldn't think to have access to. Again, Kinders are very, very smart. You have to be smart to be able to sneak into so many places and to get out of trouble so many times, and to, not be in jail every moment of your life because you're stealing things from people. So they are very, very smart. They just use their smarts for things that we don't think they should be using it for, or that we find are annoying. But TAS is very, very smart, and sometimes, like I have mentioned in previous episodes when we are talking about the books, I think that TAS is given and Kinder are given a disservice a little bit, in the fact that, yes, 90% of the times they are just being annoying when they want to talk to you, but sometimes they actually do have legit things to say. And other characters or other beings and other races miss out on those important things that could be said and could be heard about, because they're too busy thinking that this is just another annoying Kinder story. And don't give them the proper credit that they're due. And then we have, like I mentioned a little bit before, they're very innocent. Innocent not in the fact that they don't have experience with the world, but just innocent in the fact that they don't let it corrupt their soul. They don't let it affect them. They kind of just let the hardships of the world roll off them. So they have the innocence, childlike innocence on their view of the world. That even though there is so much terrible things in the world, they still let their soul be innocent and to believe that there's so much good instead of so much bad. They're overall very happy people. I don't think I've ever seen, really, other than TAS with, friends dying and stuff like that, I haven't really seen any sad Kinders. Most Kinders are very much like, yeah, let's just go out, have fun, go on an adventure. And TAS, 90% of the 3 books, is a happy-go-lucky Kinder who's just excited to be going on a trip with his friends. Of course, there are always moments, because he is a feeling person, that he gets sad because either a friend died or something bad happened, or, he's not sure how if the world's gonna end, because in the end, to Kisses, he realizes the urgency of everything that's happening. But for the most part, he is a very happy person. And even after all that, even though we do realize that he is a changed Kinder and does have these changed moments, especially since he has experienced fear, he still doesn't let that get him down. He still bounces back and tries to be happy as he can. They're very stress-free, as I'd mentioned, and they're also very fearless, other than the one tower. And obviously for Tass, the fear of having his friends being taken away from him. There isn't much that can make any Kinder afraid. Nothing else could make Tass afraid, and usually that's very helpful for him and for his friends, because he will do things that he shouldn't be doing. Or like when he gets in that dragon and he's like, whatever, doesn't matter if I get caught, let's just be a dragon for a day. That sounds cool. Very fearless. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes fear can also be good, especially for us as humans. But they are very much a fearless people, which go along with them just wanting to go on an adventure. I feel like pretty much Kinders are one of the only races that are very non-prejudice. They pretty much like anyone and love anybody, and they don't really have anything against anybody. They find everybody interesting in their own right, and they find everybody, to have good and to bad in them, and it can just be whatever else is going to happen, and they just they just kind of roll with it, which I think is another thing that you can really admire about the Kinders, that they don't ever judge anybody until they are proven to be one way or the other. You say this especially with Razlan. I mean, he never judges Razlan, ever. I mean, he does think that he can be grumpy and he doesn't want him to be in his bags and stuff like that, but he never actually thinks anything really bad about Razlan and still thinks of him as his friend. They just, again, they're like a child in the fact that they don't have any reason to think that you're a bad person, and that's something, again, that we can learn from the Kinder, to be more open about people and just let people prove themselves to us versus making assumptions of who they are or how they act before we actually get to know them. So again, that's another thing that I really admire about the Kinder. And last but not least, again, they're not really known for magic. We do know that Tass can read magic, especially with those spectacles that let him read it, and he could teach Lorana to go through it. But we don't really see him working any magic. I've never seen any other Kinder or heard of any other Kinder from Tass that could do magic, so I'm not sure if they are really a magic-prone people or not. My guess is not really. They don't really have any magic users, but I'm not 100% sure on that, since we haven't mentioned specifically from anybody that there's none or that it doesn't happen. But yeah, it does look like they can study magic just as anybody else can, but they aren't really known for working magic, which in many cases a lot of the other races are very thankful for, because just imagine a Kinder on the loose being able to wield magic. Even that, to me, is a little scary. Alright, our next set of beings are our gnomes, which gnomes kind of are a little bit of a mix of Kinder and dwarves, in my opinion. They have very similar qualities. I don't remember exactly what they said that the gnomes' origins were. I know they said it when we first met them in book 2. I feel like they're related to the Kinder for sure. I don't remember if they mentioned that them being related to the dwarves, though, so I don't remember that. But I do believe they mentioned that they were kind of a distant relative of the Kinder, but I don't remember specifically what it was. If anybody remembers what their exact origin was, please let me know down below or on Twitter. I would really love to have a refresher on that, and see exactly how that relates to, obviously, their traits, how they are and how they act. First of all, gnomes right off the bat are very, very smart. Very, very smart. Their whole culture is about learning and inventing and creating new things and being very forward thinking. So they're very, very smart. They're very, very, like I said, forward thinking. They're also very, very fast paced. They talk a mile a minute. They go a mile a minute. They don't want to waste a single second of their time, and so they're just like go, 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 trying to make new things, learn new things, be inquisitive. That's another main thing. They're very, very inquisitive, very, very wanting to know how anything and everything works. If they don't know something, they want to find out about it. that they don't know if there's not a way to do something. They want to make a way to do something. So they're very interesting. They're very much engineers. They're pretty much just a society of engineers, all of them. And they're not very diverse kind of culture. Like I said, they pretty much all the gnomes, I think, live in that one mountain. We're not 100% sure about that, but we don't know about any other gnomes that live anywhere else. It wasn't mentioned. And they all work basically they all live and work in a giant factory. Even when they're a little kid, they have a life mission that they want to fulfill, and it's something that's either about knowing something or creating something. So it's a very interesting society. They're also very obsessive. Oh, sorry guys, I gotta shift. Okay. They're very, very obsessive beings. Very obsessive. Sorry about the dog barking in the background. They just can't let things go. They're so into wanting to know everything that they just cannot let it go until they know. So they are very, very obsessive people. That can be good for what they use it for. I don't know if that's all good. Everything in moderation usually, but for them it's just all engineering, all obsessive, all inquisitive, all the time, all day long. It's like their brain is hardwired to be that way. And very experimental. And I feel like because they're so experimental, that leads to also being a non-prejudiced type people. They don't really care where ideas come from. They don't really care where something was made. They don't really care about anything. They just care about how things work and how they can create things. That's it. So they don't really care about what kind of race you are, what kind of being you are, what kind of creature you are. None of that. They're just like, do you have something interesting to tell me? If not, bye-bye. And if you do, then come and talk to me. Or can I tell you about something? If you don't know something, can I tell you about something? Okay, then you're good with me. That's about it. And overall, they're actually a very friendly group of people. Overall, they're very friendly. They welcomed they welcomed Tass and Fizban to their mountain and were instantly like, let me just show you everything. And oh, you're inquiring about something that we're inquiring about? Let's talk about it together. So, though everybody else kind of treats them rudely in the fact that they cut them off because they literally will not shut up. Other than that, they're very friendly people, and everyone usually treats them actually very friendly because they have knowledge that they want. So it's a very interesting society. I haven't really seen anything else like the gnomes in any other books that I've read. They're very unique, in my opinion. And again, they're not really prone for magic. They're not a people who really care about magic. They care more about the physical way of doing it. They're more about science, not about magic. I would say that they're the science people. They want to know how, that world works and figuring out tangible items and tangible things and creating tangible things. So they're not really known as magic users. I haven't seen any gnomes that are magic users, or even any gnomes that are interested in magic at all. So they're not really known for magic. All right, sorry, I'm shifting again here. My legs are cramping. All right, we have 3 more beings left. The next one is the Gully Dwarves. So the Gully Dwarves obviously are related to the dwarves. We do know that, and much to Flint's dismay, they are related to the dwarves. He would really prefer if they weren't related to the dwarves. He thinks that they are kind of a disgrace. And in some ways, I'm sure as we read through, you were kind of thinking, yeah, they are kind of a disgraceful being. But, every race has their own, I guess, good points. And if you're a Gully Dwarf, then you don't know any different. So there's no reason to be unhappy about it, right? I hate to say this, but the top thing that I came up with, the top trait, is that they are kind of dumb. I know that's terrible to say, but and they're not stupid, but they are kind of dumb. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's not that they don't have any brain and that they can't figure things out and they don't have some modicum of like intuition and smarts, but they're just kind of dumb people. Is that terrible for me to say? Do you get what I'm trying to say about the difference of where they're not stupid, but they're dumb? I don't know how else to describe it. Please, if somebody else gets it and there's another way to describe it, please let me know, because I don't know how else to come across with what I'm trying to say. And all I can think is that it sounds pretty terrible to say about any kind of being. But that's how I feel. Yeah, and so then obviously, like I mentioned before, they're related to the dwarves, which makes the dwarves seem much more wise group of people. And then that they're very simple people. And that's simple not in a bad way. Simple just meaning that they have simple tastes, simple desires, simple wants. And so they have a simple lifestyle. It's more about living day to day, having food to eat, not being hurt, not being in a dangerous situation, and sleeping, eating, general needs, wanting a place to live. They're just people that don't really have higher motivations. And that's okay. That's 100% okay. That doesn't mean that every person, even in a regular society, has to have higher motivations. But it seems like them as a general society are just more simple people. They just have simple wants, simple desires, simple goals in life. And sometimes that can be good too. Though they are pretty gullible people. They easily believe things or easily make wrong assumptions, and then that becomes a belief. Just like with Boo-Poo, and she waves the lizard, and she just thought because she was holding this lizard and waving it around that it worked at the one spot, even though really it was a more complicated answer to it that she didn't even think. She just thought, oh, magic, I can wave this thing around and I'll open the door. So they're very gullible, especially with the spell that Razlin puts on them that makes them all friendly. That doesn't mean they couldn't be friendly on their own, but it does make it more gullible by, their brains are easily influenced to believe things. And again, they're not known for magic. They're not a magic wielding type of people. Part of that might be just because they are more simple, and so they can't reach the complexities of magic. I don't know, but they aren't ones for wielding magic. Now, the next being that I've got are goblins. And I know goblins a lot of times can be considered creatures, not beings, but again, I was thinking, okay, what is my criteria of what I'm calling a being? And that was a humanoid, cultural-based, society-based people. So I labeled goblins as a being. Some people might argue and say that they're creatures. You can let me know down below what you think and why, but I labeled them as beings because they are humanoid, they do have thoughts and feelings, and they do have a society, even if we are not overly known about the society in our story here. We only really know about Master Toad. Master Toad is the only really goblin that we run into, and so we don't even really know much about them at all. But I did label them under beings. So we have Toad, and we see that he really is a toad of a person. And he obviously, like many of the other goblins, are on the side of Takhisis. And yeah, we don't really know too much about them other than that they don't really seem dumb, but they don't really seem smart. They seem like they're kind of very selfish creatures. I know I just called them a creature, but you know what I mean? Creature meaning more of a morale type attack, that they're not very nice people. They're more creature-ish because they aren't very nice to other people. They're very selfish, very about themselves. Which is probably why they're on the side of Takhisis, because that means that they can just do whatever they want to whoever they want and not get in trouble for it, and that's actually condoned and applauded. So that's all I really have for goblins. If you want to say more, since we, again, in our 3 books that we didn't have too much of a run-in with goblins specifically. I didn't have too many traits to put in, but you're welcome to let me know down below if you want to say anything else about goblins. And then last but not least, we have our Death Knights. Oh, our Death Knights, or at least our, don't know if all of them are called Death Knights, but our dead, I think they are all called Death Knights, but our dead ghosts like Lord Soth and those knights that were in the forest that were dead as well, those beings. Now, again, you might consider that more of a creature or more of a phantom, not necessarily a being or a race of being, especially since this one is a little bit more on the side that they don't really have a society or a culture, but they did come from beings that were alive and then were cursed to be in death. So that's kind of why I have them as beings, because they do have humanoid thoughts, feelings, emotions, and they do come from cultural ideas and norms, even if they are no longer part of that. Though technically you could say that the knights in the forest are all together and they have their own society. And Lord Soth is just the unique on his own person. It just depends on how they died and why they were cursed to be alive again. But there are beings that are never allowed to rest, never allowed to have like literally sleep and literally death rest. They are cursed because they are usually because they are terrible people. Usually they did something to cause them to be cursed. So I guess in that way they all have that correlation, all that similar type thing, is that they all did something in life that was terrible and caused grief or whatever else, and so now they are forced to live out their afterlife fulfilling what they didn't do in life. They kind of correlate to our idea of ghosts a little bit. They kind of are very similar to a ghost type being or creature, except they're just more so. They're more real than a ghost would be. They can actually interact with society and cause problems. So I guess in a way they're kind of more like phantoms, because phantoms are poltergeists that actually interact with the world, but they can show themselves to people and they actually have real physical interactions with people, objects, anything else. And they still have their own thoughts and feelings like as if they were alive. And they're just easily can kill anything and everything, and they're very much unstoppable, and that is why there's not that many of them, I believe, in the world, is because otherwise they could just run around and kill everybody. Though why they would choose to do that, considering then they would have nobody to interact with or nobody else to traumatize. That's maybe also why they don't do it. But it also depends on why they're cursed. For example, the cursed knights in the forest were bound to guard the forest, so it's not like they could leave and do whatever they wanted. But they could kill anybody that came in the forest if they felt they needed to. So, yeah, those are the Death Knights. That are all the creatures that I have, or not creatures, beings that I have listed for the world of Krynn here. You are welcome. This is all based on the 3 books that we read, not necessarily other books at this point. So, but if there's any other creatures or beings that are, or creatures that are being-like that you would like to discuss with me, of course, I would love to hear it. Go ahead and leave it down below or on my Twitter, or email me for the page, what am I trying to say? Our channel, there we go, our channel's email. That is great. I would love to have a discussion with you about everything. Now, again, our class became quite long just talking about these beings. There was very many in the list wanting to go in depth talking about them, talking about their traits, talking about examples. So I'm going to end our world analysis here today. And then for the next one, I have a little bit shorter amounts of topics for the next couple things. For our creatures, I have a shorter list. For societies, it's a little bit of a shorter list. And then I do have a little bit of history, but in the first 3 books, we don't have tons and tons of talking about for history, so that's a very shorter list as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we have our beings for this part 2, and then for part 3, we'll finish up creatures, societies, and a little bit of history on the world that we learn from the first 3 books. All right, so thanks for being patient with me, since I know it took me a little while to get back here, just trying to get caught up with things outside of our videos. Hopefully I should be back pretty steady, other than for the holidays. That might trip me up a little bit, but hopefully for the rest of the weeks I should be pretty good to go. Yeah, once again, as always, any comments, questions, concerns, leave them down below or on my Twitter at fantasyfiction1, or message me at our email. Whatever you'd like to do, I would love to have a discussion with you, and I hope that this look into the beings of Kryn was interesting to you. Hopefully it didn't ramble on too long, and I made us think about some in-depth things that made you kind of appreciate the cultures or appreciate the books a little bit more. Or if not, if you think I missed something important, go ahead and let me know. Or if you think I totally misread a type of being and their traits, go ahead and let me know that as well. I always would love to hear your thoughts and opinions and have a discussion, because we are all learning together. All right, I'll see you for our next class. And yeah, thanks. Bye.